They called him the Brockton Blockbuster, a force who ended nights with a snapping right hand nicknamed Suzie Q. He was not built in bright lights. He was built in cold roads, dim gyms, and the grind. He trained his eyes with a swinging pendulum, kept honey at hand, and drove himself through punishing rounds until the late bell meant advantage. If you want to know how that power arrived on time, follow how he trained to make it inevitable. Before we get started, remember to subscribe so you do not miss the most exciting stories about boxing's legendary fighters. Rocky Marciano was born in the working-class town of Brockton, Massachusetts, a place where the rhythm of life was the pounding of shoes in the factory and the weight of survival pressed on every family. His parents, Italian immigrants, carried the grit of hard labor, and that same grit seeped into their son. As a boy, he dreamed not of the ring, but of crouching behind the plate as a catcher in baseball, where his low stance and strong legs already told a story of power waiting to be unleashed. The Second World War changed his path. Serving in the military, he first laced up gloves and found a new way to channel his relentless energy. Those who saw him early noticed raw force but little polish. In local bouts, he even fought under the name Rocky Mac, trying to find footing in a sport that seemed too refined for his rough edges. Yet out of this rough start came a hunger, a boy who feared poverty more than pain, a young man driven to work until no opponent could outlast him. When Rocky Marciano first walked into a gym, his movements were raw, heavy, almost clumsy. But under the eye of trainer Charlie Goldman, those rough edges became the foundation of a new kind of fighter. Goldman believed that if a man was short, he should make himself even smaller. He taught Rocky to crouch low, to drive from bent knees, and to turn every limitation into leverage. In that low stance, Marciano found his identity, a compact frame that slipped under jabs and launched punches like pistons. From there came discipline that never wavered. He hammered the heavy bag until his shoulders burned, skipped rope until his lungs screamed, and carved his strength through endless calisthenics. In 1957, he even put this philosophy into print, outlining stance, defense, and the daily rhythm that turned repetition into instinct. These were not glamorous sessions, but they gave him the tools to shorten distance, close gaps, and hit with concussive force. What began as awkward steps became a foundation strong enough to support an undefeated climb through boxing's most punishing division. Rocky Marciano's body did not fit the blueprint of a classic heavyweight. He was shorter, his arms did not stretch across the ring like a whip, and by the standards of his era, he looked more like a laborer than a champion. But Charlie Goldman saw something different. He taught Rocky to take what seemed like weakness and turn it into a weapon. If you are short, go lower. If your reach is limited, strike faster and straighter. Marciano adopted a deep crouch that made his frame look even smaller, forcing opponents to punch downward and leave their chins exposed. From this compressed stance, every muscle was coiled, every step a spring. His right hand did not arc in lazy circles. It fired like a hammer from below, traveling a shorter path but carrying more weight. The rhythm was relentless. Bend the knees, roll forward, snap the shoulders, reset, repeat. Each punch was shorter, tighter, and far more dangerous than the looping swings of taller rivals. The power of this style revealed itself in his first championship fight with Jersey Joe Walcott. For 12 rounds, Walcott used his reach, jabbing and moving, controlling the pace. Yet Rocky's crouch kept him just out of clean range while edging closer with every exchange. In the 13th, he found his opening. Walcott reached downward, and Marciano's coiled right hand exploded upward. It was Suzie Q in its purest form, a short, snapping shot that ended the night in a single instant. What looked like a disadvantage in the gym had become the most feared weapon in the division. By mastering the crouch, Marciano proved that a fighter does not need height to dominate. He needed only the discipline to turn inches into power and persistence into inevitability. Rocky Marciano was not content with the standard workload of a heavyweight camp. Where most fighters prepared with 100 or so rounds of sparring, he often doubled it. In some camps, he logged as many as 250 rounds, a volume that would have broken lesser men. Each session was a grind of constant pressure, swinging until his arms throbbed, moving forward until his legs ached, refusing to allow fatigue to dictate his pace. This was not just punishment for punishment's sake. Rocky and his team believed that the body could be trained to thrive when others collapsed. By pushing himself to the edge every day, he conditioned his lungs to keep pulling in air when the 12th round arrived, and his muscles to fire crisp punches when most fighters would only clinch. The gym became a rehearsal for exhaustion, and exhaustion became familiar territory rather than fear. The value of this approach came into sharp focus in his rematch with Ezzard Charles. Early in the fight, Marciano suffered a split nose that would have convinced many to fold. Blood poured, vision blurred, yet his engine refused to sputter. Round after round, he pressed forward, his punches still short, still heavy, still insistent. Charles, one of the finest boxers of his era, began to slow while Marciano's output only swelled. By the middle rounds, the momentum was irreversible, and eventually the relentless storm forced the end. It was proof of what endless sparring could create. A fighter whose best weapon was not only his right hand, but his refusal to fade. Marciano's late-round power was no accident of nature. It was the direct result of hundreds of rounds when the gym grew silent, when his body wanted to quit, and he forced it to keep marching forward. Rocky Marciano was known for his iron fists, but behind that fury was a quieter ritual that seemed almost strange. At night, he would lie in bed and fix his gaze on a small pendulum swinging back and forth above him. To outsiders, it looked eccentric, even absurd. Yet Marciano believed it trained the tiny muscles of his eyes, sharpening focus and reaction. In the ring, this practice was not a parlor trick. It became another tool in the arsenal of a man who built himself from discipline. By teaching his eyes to lock and track movement, he gained an edge at the distance where fights are decided. He could catch the subtle lift of a shoulder, the faint shift of a hip, the warning signs that a punch was coming. When his opponents bent to strike, Marciano had already seen it, already begun to move, and was ready with his own answer. The payoff appeared when he defended his crown against Archie Moore. Marciano was dropped early, proof that even the champion could be hurt. But as the fight wore on, his ability to read at close quarters turned the tide. He slipped Moore's most dangerous counters, pressed inside, and unleashed combinations that drained the challenger. The same eyes that once followed a pendulum now read every twitch of an opponent until resistance broke. It showed that greatness is not only forged in sweat and muscle, but also in the silent discipline of focus. Marciano built a body that never quit, and he built a gaze sharp enough to find the one opening that ended a fight. Before dawn in Brockton or at mountain camps in New York, Rocky Marciano could be found pounding the roads. He ran long distances in harsh weather, sometimes through snow that bit at his lungs, believing the cold only toughened his will. These runs were not gentle jogs. They were marches of intent, each step a rehearsal for the later rounds when his opponents would gasp for breath. Back in the gym, he hammered heavy bags until the leather seemed to sag, worked the speed bag until rhythm became second nature, and drove his neck and core through endless calisthenics. These routines were not glamorous, but they were relentless, carving a frame built to absorb punishment and return fire. The result was a fighter whose stamina was as feared as his right hand, a man who carried the weight of every mile and every repetition into the ring until his rivals broke first. Discipline for Rocky Marciano did not stop at the gym doors. He was known to chew steak only to spit it out, satisfying taste without adding weight. In his pocket, he often carried a jar of honey, a simple fuel he believed gave him strength when training pushed him to the edge. These habits may have looked strange, but they revealed a fighter obsessed with control. Every bite, every sip, every choice was part of a larger plan to enter the ring, lean, relentless, and unshakable. If Rocky Marciano's body was built by sweat, his mind was forged in solitude. He approached training camps like a monk entering a monastery, stripping away every comfort and distraction. Weeks before a fight, he cut ties with the outside world, shutting out friends and family, refusing even the smallest indulgence. To him, camp was not preparation. It was confinement, a test of will that mirrored the isolation of combat itself. He carried into each day a fear that had haunted him since youth, the fear of poverty. That memory of struggle drove him harder than any opponent could. When the miles grew long or the sparring partners pushed him to the edge, he imagined the life he had escaped and promised never to return. This was not motivation that faded. It was a permanent engine in his chest. Marciano also believed recovery was part of discipline. After heavy bag rounds and sparring, he would correct mistakes with quiet shadowboxing, then punish his body with rope and calisthenics before finishing in alternating hot and cold baths. This ritual was as mental as it was physical, reinforcing the idea that every session had to be sealed with reflection and renewal. In the ring, that mindset showed in his refusal to give ground. Cuts, swelling, exhaustion, these were not reasons to slow, but signals to press harder. To watch Marciano was to witness a man who fought not only with fists, but with an unbending conviction that no hardship could break him. His conditioning of the mind was the unseen weapon that made his body's power truly unstoppable. By the time Rocky Marciano hung up his gloves, he had carved an achievement unmatched in heavyweight history: 49 wins, no defeats, 43 by knockout. He held the championship from the early 1950s until his retirement, never once allowing an opponent to take his crown. Each fight reflected not only talent, but the cumulative weight of every mile, every round, every repetition of his training. Marciano became more than a champion. He became a symbol of what relentless discipline could create. His short frame, once doubted, became proof that limitations could be reshaped into dominance. Coaches and fighters still point to his crouch, his compact power, and his relentless conditioning as lessons that outlive the man himself. For younger boxers, Marciano represents a template: toughness married to preparation, simplicity executed with absolute commitment. For historians, he stands as one of boxing's greats, the rare heavyweight who retired without defeat. His story is not only about a perfect record, but about a mindset that refused compromise. The Rock from Brockton remains a reminder that greatness in the ring is built far from the spotlight, in the discipline to endure what others cannot. Even legends are not free from doubt. Critics pointed to the age of some of Marciano's challengers, arguing that Joe Louis, Ezzard Charles, and Archie Moore were past their prime when they faced him. Others debated the narrow decision in his first fight with Roland Lastarsa. Tales also spread that he trained with a 300-pound heavy bag, though such stories lack firm evidence. Yet each controversy only sharpened his reputation. Instead of weakening his place in history, these disputes highlighted how his sheer discipline and punishing style overwhelmed opponents regardless of circumstance. Deep crouch, endless rounds, strange rituals, and a mind that never wavered forged Rocky Marciano into an unbeaten icon of the heavyweight division. If you enjoyed this story, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out more similar videos on the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you.